from you, that we would treasure it, whether it brings challenges or rest or some combination of that. We just ask that you would help us to see that as part of your ordained purpose for our lives. Also, I ask that you would help us to be in awe of Jesus as we conclude this study of Matthew. Help us to remember and to continue to reflect, and also to open our Bibles to Matthew regularly, even after we conclude the study, that we would continue to be full of awe of you. Jesus, our Lord, who is also tender towards us, gentle and lowly, but one who guides us with love, compassion, and sacrifice. We thank you for this time that we've had together, and we ask for your blessing as we go different ways on Tuesdays for a while, but then also as we hope for you to bring us back together in coming months as well. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Well, good morning. This is the conclusion of our study of Matthew. You know, some of you are looking at me with sad eyes. It is sad in many ways. This has been a joy. Come on in and grab a seat. I was going to go over announcements at the end, but maybe I'll just do that as we're sort of still getting situated. First of all, the missions dinner is tonight. Okay, now this is a quiz. Ready? Raise your hand if you know that you do not have to RSVP. Raise your hand if you know that you don't have to RSVP. Okay, great. So that means if you haven't signed up in any way, you are doing the right thing. Okay? So no need to sign up. You just come. Okay? Raise your hand if you know what time it starts. So what time does it start? I'm not going to call anybody. But great, lots of people know what time it starts. That means it starts at 6. And if you forget, you could probably turn to your neighbor and ask her because she knows. All right, it starts at 6 p.m. Where is it? Raise your hand if you know where it is. It's here. Okay, so all you have to do is come back here at 6 p.m. if you want to, okay? And you don't have to bring anything, okay? You can if you want to. The options for things to bring at this point is it salad topping or a friend. I think we have plenty of desserts, okay? Which isn't a bad thing. I'm just saying. So whoever signed up for desserts, that's great. Whatever you have that you're bringing looks delicious. I think we're gonna have plenty. So if you want to bring something, bring a salad topping or a friend, okay? Or just yourself. All right. Great. So we meet back here. Okay. Number 2. May 4th. 2 things happening on May 4th. One is the final gospel-led moms for the year, whatever. We take a break in the summertime. So that's another, just come, bring a friend. We're going to have a little bit more brunchy food, like a granola and yogurt bar, to celebrate the end. So feel free to bring a friend. And anybody is welcome. We meet in the comments. Then also, it's the National Day of Prayer. And so if you want to be a part of that in your community, you can just Google National Day of Prayer, and then you can enter your zip code and find out where your local group is meeting and join up with them. So that's a great way to get involved. Maybe meet somebody in your neighborhood who also comes to that. So that's a really great opportunity. June 6th is a Tuesday, and that's when our summer study, Prodigal God, is starting. It will run for 6 weeks, taking a break for VBS, which you can see on there, and taking a break for the 4th of July. So 6 weeks you can come. There will be a sign up in the newsletter next week. So we're starting all the summertime invitations and sign-ups next week. So Pat Flanagan, Betsy Ziesenis, and Carol Wilson will be leading that. That will be Tuesday mornings at 9:30. All of this will be in print, but just reciting it in room 213. VBS is June 12th through 16. You're welcome to volunteer. That would be a Kayla thing. We're working on that. Yep. We should have childcare. So yes, you can plan on it at least. Maybe help us find something if we can. Okay, then June 17th, so this is Saturday after VBS concludes, is our summer social at Susan Klotz's house. So we will be outdoors, poolside. We'll have 4 to 6. We'll just have a little summer party. Then I will be hosting a book club on 3 Monday evenings, June 19th, July 10th, and July 31st. So we'll cover 2 different books with that. More information coming soon. Okay, I don't want to take more time with announcements, but I did want to bring those things to your attention. And now we're going to get started on our lesson, now that everybody's sort of situated again. So, you should have a handout. There's a few extra, if you don't, but there's usually always extra. So the key idea here is, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, which is with some of the concluding words of Matthew and fitting for our wrap-up. So first, context. All 4 Gospels tell of the resurrection of Jesus. But there are variations, which holds true to separate eyewitness accounts. So that's something that we can hold on to as well. So the Gospels tell us slightly different accounts from what happened after Jesus raises from the dead. And also just something to note, that none of the Gospels spend much time on the sort of post-resurrection events. They all spend more time on the passion narrative. It takes up more space in general. But epistles, or letters in the New Testament, do unpack and explain the meaning of the resurrection more. So if you're feeling like, wow, I'm just getting into what's going on here, Matthew, and then you stop. Yes, that you're probably not the only one who feels that way, but there are other books in the Bible that tell us more and explain more. So Acts gets into that more, which is not a letter, but more, more action. And then a lot of Paul's letters and other places tell us more about what the resurrection means and how to understand it. So that's sort of the context of this last chapter within the broader New Testament narrative. Okay, on to observation. Okay, what do you notice is repeated? What do we see is repeated a few times? This is you can tell me. All right.
Repeated from the gospel?
No, repeated sorry. Now we're just in this lesson. What we read today. There's a few sentences that are repeated, a few things. If you'd like to say it, if you notice, great. If not, that's okay. More than happy to say it.
Not be afraid.
Yeah, there we go. There's at least one. I am going to take this off. Sorry. Don't worry. So, yes, the encouragement to not be afraid. Both the angel says that and Jesus said that, so don't fear. Because you can imagine there would be some reasons to be afraid, right? This is startling and not at all what they were expecting, especially in that moment. There's also a flurry of activity, and this is true with all the Gospels as well. We see this moving here and there, right? They're coming and they're going and they're seeing Jesus and they're going back and the angels doing stuff and the leaders are also doing those things too. Okay, and then finally we have go tell is repeated as well. The angel says that, right? Go tell his disciples, and Jesus says it too. Go and tell. That's in our sort of theme. The key idea. So there's an instruction to not fear, and there's an instruction to go and proclaim. Those things are repeated. Women as the first eyewitnesses. How many, raise your hand if you've heard that? That is kind of crazy and unusual for that culture. Yes, we've heard that before, right? So women were not allowed to be witnesses in court. They were not sort of trusted with official things. I think I've heard that so many times I forget the significance then of the way the Gospels say that the women were the first ones to see, and the women were the first eyewitnesses. And I think I have to remind myself, yeah, that really was a big deal. And what a treasure that is, right? As we women see the way that the Bible as a whole and Jesus treats women with dignity as whole people, and just really loves and honors us and those specific women too, despite the fact that it was totally countercultural. So what a beautiful thing that is. Also, it really lends itself to a great example, not just one, this is not the only one, but a great example of how crazy it would be for people to make this up. Right? You're not going to make it up when everybody's going to question the veracity of what the people are saying. We've talked about, sorry, I'm not going to go there. But I said it for a second. In places where, I don't know, like movies and TV shows where you have courtroom dramas, and then they try to make out the witness to be an unreliable witness, right? And that's the whole case. You've seen those things like that. I have not planned this, so I'm just going to let you guys use your imagination. So that would be the idea, right? Why would you stake this huge claim on what was considered an unreliable witness? So again, another example of how we can see that the gospel stories are true. They're not hiding things, right? They're not hiding the messiness of the way the truth and the story really happened. Okay, and then again, I already mentioned this idea of agreement with variation that carries throughout the Gospels, right? So the Gospel stories have agreement with each other and variation that is consistent with the way separate eyewitness accounts work, right? So we have some people tell some details, others don't, and we have this variation that gives us a full picture of what happened in the days and the moments right after Jesus' resurrection. And finally, I feel like we wouldn't be talking through Matthew without a little contrast and irony, right? How many of you noticed the contrast of the leaders' responses, the Jewish leaders' responses to the time just after Jesus' death and the disciples' response after Jesus' death, right? So the leaders, believe, they remember that Jesus said that he was going to raise from the dead, right? The disciples are really struggling to remember that, and very much struggling to believe that. In other Gospels, right, it says they were afraid and they were locked in a room together. Whereas the Jewish leaders are spreading, that they are taking steps to make sure that people don't see that Jesus could have risen from the dead, right? They're part of the flurry of activity, but they're trying to suppress the truth, right? They take his word seriously, kind of unlike the disciples, but with unbelief rather than belief. And what's interesting too is that in their attempts to suppress the story, they actually end up furthering it, right? Because they pay people to say things, and then that spreads, and then we get even more of the story that's getting out, right? Like when you mean it's like, don't tell me like this, and then we're like, So things like that. Okay, so we have those kinds of things to observe. Okay, there are many things as usual to unpack, but I'm going to jump now to a couple verses. And towards the end of the passage. How many of you noticed verse 17? Go open your Bibles right now. If you see verse 17, it's kind of an interesting little verse. And we're going to move into the meaning section now and talk about doubt a little bit. All right, but anybody willing to read verse 17? You have it, Maureen? Yeah, go ahead, Maureen.
When they saw him, they worshipped him with songs of
Okay, thank you. All right, so what do you think about that? Worshiping and doubting. And maybe for some, that feels really different. That's okay. God has made us differently. We all struggle with something, right? So those are different for different people. So I want to explain a little bit from what I learned in the commentary that I looked at. First of all, there's no indication that the doubters represent a separate group. So it says some worship and some doubted. So the way the Greek works, that's not a separate group. Okay, so meaning those are his disciples. The disciples are gathered, and some worship, and some, so we're doing this together. It's happening together. Also, the word for doubt here in the Greek is not the most common verb used for doubt in the New Testament. So it suggests that it's maybe a little bit different nuance. So the commentary that I towed around with me suggested that perhaps hesitate would be a better way to think about this. Not all in all doubting and not believing, like Thomas who doubted, right? And who didn't believe, but more like hesitating. So the disciples are worshiping and perhaps there's a part of them that are hesitating. Luke 24, I'm going to say this so you can look it up. 24, 36 to 41. Excuse me. That's a little passage that describes the same scene. So again, Luke 24, 36 to 41 says that the disciples disbelieved for joy. Right? It's too good to be true. They're seeing him, and they're so happy they can hardly believe it. Can we understand that? Emotion to disbelieve for joy. Yeah. So things are happening so fast it's hard to catch up and make sense of it all. Has that ever happened to you? Perhaps, right? And you're like, oh my goodness, I thought it was this, and that's horrible, and now it's this, and that's great, but I'm still trying to get my head around the whole situation. Okay? And that's sort of what they're feeling, I think. So I think that's helpful and comforting to us, perhaps, that there can be room for us. I know, at least for myself, I think, wow, this is so good. How can it be true? I can let go of so much, but I have a hard time really doing that. I have to remember the gospel every day. So there's the disciples that hesitate. We may be like that. Then there's also the other side, the general skeptics. And these would be the Jewish leaders who heard his words and acted on it, but they acted to squash the truth, to protect themselves, rather than to believe. So those are really different kinds of doubting, and really different ways of sort of being skeptical. There is a man named E.P. Sanders, who is a New Testament scholar. I looked him up, died just early last year. So he was a well-known figure, in New Testament theology and studies. He was at Duke University for a while. Anyway, scholar, but a skeptic of the gospel. Skeptic and not a believer. And this is what he said about the idea of the resurrection. So there are many, too, who really struggle with the idea of the resurrection, and maybe you've encountered that. Here's what he says. I do not regard deliberate fraud as a worthwhile explanation of the resurrection accounts. So this is someone who does not believe in Jesus, but also doesn't buy into the idea that the Jewish leaders try to put forth, right? So he says, many people in these lists, so of the disciples and others, were to spend the rest of their lives proclaiming that they had seen the risen Lord. And several of them would die for their cause. That Jesus' followers, and later Paul, had resurrection experiences is, in my judgment, a fact. What the reality was that gave rise to these experiences, I do not know. So a scholar is willing to assert that he believes that people really did have these resurrection encounters, but he still doesn't believe that they were legitimate encounters with the risen Lord. So I think maybe we talk to ourselves, and there's part of us that just struggle. Wow, what madness is this, right? And that's what the Bible says too. I will be a stumbling block, right? For those, and it's hard, right? Our whole foundation rests upon the risen Lord. And yet we do have these eyewitness accounts. And we have people who study this and believe those eyewitness accounts are real. And we have all the details of the gospel, the historicity of the Bible, that shows all these little details. And I would encourage you, if you have a friend or if you or yourself are just wondering, to look into this. Right? The Gospels share all of these names and places and details. And they were written at the same time as these people were alive. And nobody came forth and said, wait, what? No, that guy wasn't there. He didn't live there. We didn't see anybody walking around that had been, remember the tomb and the people risen from the dead briefly? Or we don't know how long. We just know that some people were risen when Jesus died, right? Nobody said that didn't happen. So, there's lots of things out there. Yes, there are skeptics. The Jewish leaders still didn't believe, even though they heard Jesus' words and acted on them. But we have the privilege to believe and to say, God, help me in my unbelief, right? So, where are you? I don't know where you are, but if you have some doubts, if you are struggling sometimes with these different accounts, you're not alone. And that does not exclude you from the gospel and from the grace that Jesus offers. Did the disciples believe well all the time? No. Did they act well all the time? No. And Jesus loves them and gives them the Great Commission. So, moving on. Jesus' final words of how to be a disciple. With the imperative tense, right? You should be baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Spirit. So we have the Trinity there. You should be teaching them to observe what I've told you. These are all verbs, right? Go, tell, baptize, teach, make disciples. Okay, so finally, with application, I am moving back to the ideas of do, be, go, see, which is nothing fancy, but just a way to structure different kinds of application. So first of all, what should we do? Here's a quote from the commentary that I use. We should obviously make disciples. Here's the quote. This commission is not to talk about Jesus, preach the gospel, make converts, start churches, although his commission assumes all of these. Right? So it's not specifically to do, not just to talk about Jesus, preach the gospel, make converts, or start churches, although that's assumed, but it's to make disciples, is to make converts and lead them in the arduous journey to maturity. And that is a daunting task, right? We're making converts and leading them to maturity, which is not easy. But that is the Great Commission that's given to all of us. And as our preacher last Sunday, Dale Hollenbach, our guest, said, it's the Great Commission, not a great suggestion. And then second, be. This reminds me that anyone can be a disciple. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. It is tiny. That's back to Matthew 13. Tiny but mighty, and it grows. Our faith is that it's as small as a mustard seed can move mountains. That's another chapter in Matthew. I think it's 17 or 18. And then what should our goal be? Our goal should be going to all nations, which includes our global missionaries. But it also includes the pockets where we live here in St. Louis, where we live, our home, our work, where we play, hang out, neighbors. And then see, what should we see? And I think something that jumps out to me throughout this book is that we should see ourselves as Jesus sees us. We may have little faith, but we have a big job. And Jesus sustains us in that. He sees our failing, just like he saw the disciples failing and predicted it, but that does not disqualify us from the commission. And that should make us both encouraged and emboldened, right? God sees our failings, and he still gives us that commission. And also, we need to see that God is with us. The beginning of Matthew talks about how one of Jesus' names is Emmanuel, God is with us. And the end of Matthew says, Jesus says, surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So that includes us, that Jesus is with us. So may we reflect on that, be in awe of Jesus and the way he sees us. That in itself can produce awe, I think. So you will have time, I'm sorry, I totally talked too long today. You will have time to unpack the whole book. We're going to talk about some of the main things in Matthew. I will miss seeing you all, but I hope to see you next fall, whatever date that is, sometime in the middle of September. So come back. And I'd love to see you tonight and some of those other times that I have. So I'm going to pray and send you out. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you again for your wisdom. I ask that you would help us to not go in our own strength, but go with your strength and your power, seeing ourselves as you see us. Not perfect, maybe with little faith, but that you still trust us with your kingdom. And I also ask that you would help us to remember that you are with us always. In Jesus' name, amen.